I was employed to be the technical advisor on a new Hollywood movie about Carlo Gambino. Let's check it out. I'm James Gladwish and welcome to OC Shorts, bringing you detailed historical snapshots of the American Mafia and other organised crime. Feel free to subscribe if you like that sort of thing. A couple of years ago, I was emailed by a Hollywood director asking me if I would like to work on a new movie that he was about to direct. The email was from Joe Gallo, an established director whose work I was familiar with. At the time, some part of me believed that the email was some kind of prank being pulled by one of the many trolls that I have encountered since starting this channel. Nevertheless, as I was a big fan of Joe Gallo's film Middlemen, starring Luke Wilson, Giovanni Ribisi, James Caan and Gabriel Macht, I decided to reply to the email and set up a call with Joe Gallo, as he requested. I was still a tiny bit paranoid and searched for footage of Joe Gallo speaking prior to our call. And so, when we had our first conversation, I was evidently delighted to find myself speaking with the man who had worked for many years in Hollywood. George then told me that he was working on a film about the life and times of mob boss Carlo Gambino. He was working with screenwriter Nick Vallelonga, who won the Academy Award for Best Screenplay for the movie The Green Book, starring Viggo Mortensen. The Green Book was about Nick Vallelonga's father, Anthony Tony Lip Vallelonga, who was hired to be the driver and bodyguard of pianist Don Shirley on his tour of the South. Tony Lip is most famous for portraying New York mob boss Carmine Lupatazzi in the classic Mafia TV series The Sopranos. So anyway, Joe Gallo told me that he wanted me to be the historical technical advisor on his new movie about Carlo Gambino. A press announcement was featured in the Hollywood magazine Variety. It read, "Veteran Hollywood multi-hyphenate Joe Gallo, Bad Boys, The Comeback Trail, is attached to direct Gambino, a high-end biopic about organised crime boss Carlo Gambino, that Gallo is co-writing with two-time Oscar winner Nick Vallelonga, Green Book. The ambitious project, announced in Cannes, is being lead produced by Julius R. Nasso, also a Hollywood veteran, best known for his production partnership with Steven Seagal that went sour. Nasso has acquired rights to the novel Gambino the Rise by Pierre James, which delves into the US story of Cosa Nostra, starting from its roots in Italy, and the role played by Carlo Gambino, who was its boss from 1957 until his death in 1976 of natural causes in his Massapequa, Long Island home. "I've known this story all my life," Gallo told Variety, speaking from Los Angeles. Gallo added that Gambino's world is very different from that of The Sopranos, noting that Carlo Gambino came from an educated background and was a quiet, soft-spoken man with a courtly manner. "He was a businessman in a darker universe," Gallo said. "A tremendous Machiavellian money maker. That's why he got to the top and stayed there for decades." Vallelonga, speaking in Cannes, noted that the approach he and Gallo are taking is, "This is not just a mob movie. We've seen a lot of that. This is Shakespearean. It's on that level. We have to elevate the material, and that's what we are going for." And so I had several calls with Joe Gallo and Nick Vallelonga about what exactly they required from me. As mentioned in the Variety article, the Gambino movie is to be predominantly based on the book Gambino the Rise by James Pierre. And Joe Gallo and Nick Vallelonga wanted me to provide some historical accuracy to the events of Carlo Gambino's life. I set about putting together detailed documents on the life of Carlo Gambino. I focused on some of the lesser known pieces of information on Gambino, as well as covering the major events that shaped Gambino's rise in the underworld. Like most of us, I'm a fan of mob movies such as Goodfellas and Casino. But as a historian, despite how good those films were, I knew that those movies contained many historical inaccuracies. I wanted to help them make a movie that would dispel the myths around Carlo Gambino and be closer to the actual historical truth. For example, it is often said that Carlo Gambino was behind the murder of his then boss Albert Anastasia in 1957. A famous mob hit that eventually led to Gambino becoming boss of the crime family that still bears his name. However, multiple FBI files, based on information from informants who were made men in the Gambino family, actually indicate that Gambino was not behind the Anastasia assassination, and that Anastasia was murdered because he was trying to kill 3 prominent members of his own crime family. They were Joseph Riccobono, Joseph Biondo, and Charles Dongara. And that Joseph Riccobono was the driving force behind the plot, and that Joseph Biondo reached out to Lower East Side mobster Stephen Armone to put together a hit team to kill Anastasia, with the shooters in the Anastasia murder most likely being Stephen Grimalta and Joseph Cahill, and not Crazy Joe Gallo and Carmine Persico as some books state, as I have covered in some of my previous videos. The book Gambino the Rise is a novel, a fictitious account of Gambino's life, based to some extent on true events. However, the book places Carlo Gambino in events where there is no historical evidence to support. For example, the book has Carlo Gambino personally involved in the hit on feared mobster Umberto Valenti in 1922. The fictional account in the book has Gambino in a car with Vito Genovese and Albert Anastasia, ready to kill Valenti. Gambino is assigned the shooter, but he sees a police car and stops. Anastasia then steps in and shoots Valenti, and Gambino then shoots out the tyres of a police car. There is no historical evidence to support this at all. After being paid to provide detailed documents on Carlo Gambino's life, Joe Gallo very kindly sent me the finished screenplay to review. However, Gallo, who is one of the nicest men I've encountered in Hollywood, sent me a message stating that they used some of the information that I provided. However, they had decided to write the screenplay based on the myths around Gambino, as it provided a more cinematic experience. And although I'm a stickler for historical accuracy, I completely understand the decision made by Joe Gallo and Nick Vallelonga. Movies need to have exciting elements, and as the old saying goes, don't let the truth get in the way of a good story. My involvement in the project did not stop there. Joe Gallo put me in contact with the production team, who had broken down the screenplay into a document that outlined each scene to be shot. I was to work with the production team to review this scene document and ensure that the timeline of events was correct. Unfortunately, with many aspects in place and ready, the production of the movie has stalled. However, Joe Gallo informed me that these things happen all the time, and that Hollywood moves surprisingly slowly. Interestingly, this isn't the only occasion that I've worked on a mob-related production, this time on a new TV series. But I will fill you all in on this when I am allowed to. In the comments below, let me know your thoughts on the topic covered in this video. I hope you found that interesting. Thanks for watching.